Ancient Egypt left behind towering pyramids, magnificent temples, and some of the most detailed records of the ancient world. Yet, hidden beneath those monuments are stories that refuse to fit neatly into history. Pharaohs who appeared and vanished without explanation. Royal deaths surrounded by unanswered questions. Political struggles carefully erased from official records. Thousands of years later, broken inscriptions and scattered discoveries are all that remain, leaving historians to reconstruct one of civilization's greatest collections of unsolved mysteries. The mystery of Smenkhare, Egypt's vanishing pharaoh. Imagine ruling one of the most powerful kingdoms on earth, and then almost disappearing from history. For most kings, even those who reigned briefly, history leaves behind a trail. There are monuments, inscriptions, royal decrees, statues, or carefully preserved accounts of their achievements. Ancient Egypt was especially meticulous when it came to documenting its rulers. Every pharaoh understood that memory was power. To have your name carved into stone was to ensure your legacy would outlive your lifetime. Yet one ruler seems to have slipped through the cracks almost completely. His name was Smenkhare. Even today, archaeologists continue to debate one astonishing question. Who exactly was he? The mystery begins during one of the most unusual chapters in Egyptian history. For generations, Egypt had been built upon a vast religious system involving countless gods, magnificent temples, and an influential priesthood. Then everything changed under the reign of Akhenaten. His government transformed religion in ways that unsettled the traditional order, creating an era unlike any before it. Political structures shifted. Long-standing customs were challenged. Even Egypt's capital was relocated as the kingdom entered a period of remarkable change. But dramatic reforms often leave uncertainty behind them. When Akhenaten's reign approached its end, Egypt faced an increasingly complicated question. Who would rule next? Ordinarily, royal succession followed familiar patterns, supported by generations of tradition, yet this period appears anything but straightforward. Instead of a clear transition, historians encounter fragmented records, damaged inscriptions, conflicting evidence, and mysterious names appearing only briefly before disappearing again. Among those names is Smenkhare. Unlike famous rulers whose faces appear across countless monuments, Smenkhare exists only in scattered pieces. A handful of inscriptions, a few damaged references, small clues separated by centuries. Each discovery answers one question while creating several more. Some records suggest he ruled as pharaoh. Others hint that he may have shared power during the closing years of Akhenaten's reign. Even his family connections remained uncertain. Was he a brother, a son, a close royal relative, or someone elevated unexpectedly during an unstable political moment? The surviving evidence refuses to provide certainty. This uncertainty becomes even more intriguing because of how completely he seems to vanish afterward. Later rulers proudly celebrated long royal lineages whenever doing so strengthened their authority. Yet Smenkhare receives almost no lasting recognition. It is as though history paused for a brief moment, acknowledged his existence, and then quietly moved on. For historians, silence can sometimes become more revealing than written records. Ancient Egypt preserved enormous quantities of information across temples, tombs, and monuments. When an important figure leaves behind only fragments, researchers naturally ask why. Was the evidence simply lost over thousands of years, or was someone deliberately removing it? Throughout Egyptian history, powerful rulers occasionally reshaped the past. Names could disappear from monuments, images could be altered, royal achievements might be reassigned to another king. Political rivals sometimes faded from official memory not because they never existed, but because later governments preferred that people forget them. That possibility has kept the mystery of Smenkhare alive for generations. Adding another layer of uncertainty is the remarkable artistic style of the period itself. The royal family of Akhenaten's era was portrayed differently from previous dynasties. Artistic conventions changed dramatically, making it more difficult to identify individuals with complete confidence. Some surviving images raise further questions about whether certain royal figures have been correctly identified at all. Could one depiction represent multiple people? Could damaged inscriptions have altered modern interpretations? Small details suddenly become enormously important. a single carved symbol, a damaged cartouche, an incomplete royal title. Each piece carries weight because so little survives. Archaeology often feels like assembling a puzzle after most of its pieces have disappeared. Researchers rarely discover complete stories. Instead, they recover isolated fragments separated by centuries of natural decay, environmental damage, and human activity. Every inscription must be compared with countless others. Every object is examined for context. Even the smallest discovery has the potential to reshape an entire historical timeline. That careful process has transformed the mystery of Smenkhare into one of Egypt's most fascinating historical debates. Rather than producing one universally accepted answer, every new interpretation opens additional possibilities. Some scholars believe Smenkhare briefly stabilized the kingdom during a difficult political transition. Others question whether his reign was even independent. Still others wonder whether later political changes erased much of his legacy before it could become permanent. Without complete records, certainty remains impossible. And perhaps that uncertainty reveals something important about ancient Egypt itself. History often gives the impression that powerful civilizations operated with perfect order. Royal successions appear neat. Dynasties seem carefully organized. Monuments project confidence and permanence. Reality was almost certainly far more complicated. Behind every polished temple wall stood human decisions, court politics, personal loyalties, family rivalries, unexpected events, moments of confusion that official records sometimes concealed rather than explained. Smenkhare may represent one of those forgotten moments. A ruler caught between enormous political transformations. A king remembered just long enough to leave traces, but not long enough to secure an unquestioned place in history. That possibility explains why researchers continue returning to the evidence. Every newly examined inscription, every restored artifact, every archaeological excavation connected to this period offers another opportunity to understand what happened inside Egypt's royal court during one of its most turbulent transitions. The challenge is that archaeology rarely provides dramatic final answers. Instead, progress comes through careful accumulation. One fragment confirms a royal title, another clarifies a relationship. A damaged inscription becomes slightly more readable through improved technology. Gradually, historians refine their understanding while acknowledging the limits of the surviving evidence. In many ways, the mystery of Smenkhare represents the broader challenge of studying ancient Egypt. People often imagine archaeology as the discovery of spectacular treasures, gold masks, magnificent statues, hidden tombs. Those discoveries certainly matter, but equally important are the tiny details that rarely attract headlines: broken pottery, incomplete carvings, fragments of stone carrying only a few surviving symbols. Sometimes those modest discoveries become the most valuable clues of all. The story of Smenkhare survives almost entirely because dedicated researchers have spent decades studying precisely those kinds of fragments. Each piece contributes another small insight into a chapter of Egyptian history that remains frustratingly incomplete. Yet perhaps that incompleteness is exactly what continues to captivate historians. Unlike many famous rulers whose lives appear well documented, Smenkhare leaves room for genuine investigation. The available evidence invites careful questions rather than simple conclusions. Who was he? How much authority did he truly possess? Why do the historical records become so faint during his reign? And why did later generations preserve so little about someone who may have briefly worn Egypt's most powerful crown? Those questions remain unanswered. Thousands of years have passed since his name was first carved into stone, yet the silence surrounding his reign continues to echo through modern archaeology. Each excavation, each restored inscription, and each fresh analysis carries the possibility that one overlooked detail could reshape everything historians think they know. Until that evidence appears, Smenkhare remains exactly what makes ancient Egypt so endlessly fascinating: a ruler who stood at the center of one of history's greatest civilizations, yet somehow became one of its greatest mysteries. The Dakamunzu affair, the queen who asked Egypt's greatest enemy for help. History is filled with unexpected alliances, but few are as astonishing as the moment an Egyptian queen reached beyond her own kingdom and appealed directly to one of Egypt's greatest rivals. For centuries, Egypt stood among the most powerful civilizations in the ancient world. Its rulers projected confidence through monumental temples, carefully managed diplomacy, and an image of unwavering stability. Royal succession was expected to remain within the sacred bloodline, reinforcing the belief that the throne belonged only to those chosen by divine tradition. Then something happened that shattered those expectations. A royal letter crossed international borders carrying a request so extraordinary that even the foreign king who received it struggled to believe it was genuine. The sender identified herself only by the title Dakamunzu, a name that continues to puzzle historians today. Her true identity remains one of ancient Egypt's most enduring mysteries. What survives is not her personal name, but a title recorded in foreign sources, leaving researchers to debate which Egyptian queen stood behind one of history's boldest diplomatic appeals. According to the surviving accounts, the queen explained that her husband had died. More importantly, she declared that she had no suitable son to inherit the throne. That statement alone hinted at an unfolding political crisis. In a kingdom where dynastic continuity was considered essential, uncertainty over succession could quickly become dangerous. Rival factions might compete for influence. Powerful officials could see opportunities to advance their own ambitions. Every decision carried enormous consequences for Egypt's future. Faced with this uncertainty, the queen made a request unlike anything expected from an Egyptian ruler. She asked the Hittite king to send one of his sons to Egypt so that she could marry him. The proposal was extraordinary for several reasons. Egypt generally viewed itself as the dominant power in the region. Royal marriages often strengthened diplomatic relationships, but the idea of inviting a foreign prince to become pharaoh challenged long-standing traditions and political expectations. To the Hittite court, the letter seemed almost impossible to accept at face value. The Hittite king reportedly questioned whether the message could be authentic. Why would an Egyptian queen voluntarily ask for a foreign prince when Egypt possessed its own royal family and powerful nobility? The request sounded so unusual that suspicion naturally followed. Could this be a carefully designed trap? Was someone attempting to lure a Hittite prince into danger? Or had events inside Egypt truly become so unstable that such an extraordinary proposal suddenly seemed necessary? Unable to determine the truth immediately, the Hittite ruler chose caution. Rather than sending a prince at once, he dispatched an envoy to investigate the situation firsthand. This decision reflected both political wisdom and genuine disbelief. The consequences of making the wrong choice could affect relations between two major kingdoms, already navigating a complex regional balance of power. When the envoy returned, the reports apparently convinced the Hittite court that the queen's request was sincere. Only then did the king agree to send one of his sons, Prince Ananza, toward Egypt. It should have marked the beginning of a remarkable diplomatic alliance. Instead, it became the beginning of another mystery. Prince Ananza never reached the Egyptian throne. Somewhere during his journey, he died under circumstances that remain uncertain. The surviving records do not provide a clear explanation. They simply reveal that the prince never completed the mission that had promised to reshape the political future of two great civilizations. His death immediately transformed an already fragile situation into an international crisis. The Hittite king reportedly reacted with anger, believing that Egypt bore responsibility for what had happened. Whether his suspicions reflected reality or grief remains impossible to determine, but the diplomatic consequences were significant. A marriage intended to stabilize two kingdoms instead deepened distrust between them. For modern historians, the Dakamunzu affair presents several intertwined mysteries. The first concerns the queen herself. Who was Dakamunzu? Several possibilities have been proposed over the years, yet none commands universal agreement. The surviving evidence simply does not provide enough certainty to identify her beyond reasonable doubt. The second mystery concerns her motivations. If the letter accurately reflected the political situation, what circumstances inside Egypt led her to seek such an unprecedented solution? Did she believe no Egyptian candidate could secure the throne peacefully? Was she attempting to prevent a struggle among competing factions, or was the request motivated by personal concerns intertwined with the kingdom's uncertain future? Without additional records, these questions remain unanswered. The third mystery surrounds Prince Ananza's fate. How did his journey end? Was his death the result of political conflict, unfortunate circumstances, or events that history no longer preserves? The available evidence leaves room for careful discussion but not definitive conclusions. This uncertainty highlights one of the greatest challenges in reconstructing ancient history. Modern audiences often imagine historians working with complete records waiting to be interpreted. In reality, many historical narratives survive only because fragments happened to endure while countless others disappeared. Letters decay. Official archives are destroyed. Monuments erode. Political upheaval reshapes collective memory. What remains is often incomplete. The Dakamanzu affair survives largely through foreign records rather than detailed Egyptian accounts. That alone creates additional challenges, requiring historians to compare different sources while recognizing that each reflects its own perspective and priorities. Ancient diplomacy depended heavily upon written communication, yet only a small fraction of those documents survived thousands of years. Each surviving letter therefore becomes enormously valuable. The Dakamunzu correspondence offers an unusually personal glimpse into political uncertainty at the highest level of Egyptian government. Instead of celebrating military victories or religious achievements, it reveals hesitation, vulnerability, and urgent decision-making. These human moments often disappear beneath the grandeur of ancient monuments. Gigantic temples project permanence, royal statues express confidence, official inscriptions emphasize strength. Private correspondence tells a different story. It reminds us that behind every monument stood individuals confronting uncertainty with limited information, difficult choices, and immense pressure. The queen who wrote that remarkable letter may have believed she was protecting Egypt's future. The Hittite king likely believed he was making a cautious diplomatic decision. Prince Ananza may have viewed the journey as an opportunity unlike any other in the ancient world, yet history preserved only fragments of their story. One letter, a diplomatic mission, an unexplained death, centuries of unanswered questions. Perhaps that is why the Dakamunzu affair continues to fascinate scholars today. It combines royal succession, international diplomacy, political uncertainty, and missing evidence into a single historical puzzle. Every element appears significant, yet none provides complete certainty. Researchers continue examining inscriptions, comparing timelines, and analyzing diplomatic records in hopes of clarifying the identities and events behind this remarkable episode. Advances in archaeology and historical analysis occasionally refine our understanding, but the central mysteries remain remarkably resilient. Who was the queen? Why did she make such an extraordinary request? What truly happened to Prince Ananza before he reached Egypt? Until stronger evidence emerges, those questions remain suspended between history and mystery. The Dakamunzu affair reminds us that even one of the world's most carefully documented civilizations could experience moments of profound uncertainty, moments in which the official record grew quiet, leaving later generations to reconstruct the past from scattered clues and enduring silence. The murder of Prince Ananza, the diplomatic mission that ended in silence in the ancient world. Royal marriages were rarely about romance. They were powerful political agreements capable of reshaping alliances, preventing wars, and securing entire kingdoms. A single marriage between two royal families could alter the balance of power across the Near East. That is why the journey of Prince Ananza should have become one of history's greatest diplomatic successes. Instead, it became one of ancient Egypt's most haunting mysteries. The prince left his homeland carrying extraordinary expectations. He had been chosen by his father, the Hittite king, after careful deliberation. Only after confirming that the Egyptian queen's request appeared genuine did the Hittite court agree to send a royal heir across foreign territory toward Egypt. If everything had gone according to plan, Ananza would have married the widowed Egyptian queen and potentially become pharaoh of one of the most powerful civilizations in the ancient world. It was an unprecedented opportunity. Yet he never arrived. Somewhere along the journey, the prince disappeared from history. The surviving records simply state that he died before reaching Egypt. What actually happened remains unknown. That uncertainty has fascinated historians for generations because the consequences were immediate and far-reaching. For the Hittite king, the prince's death was more than a family tragedy. It represented the collapse of an ambitious diplomatic agreement. According to surviving accounts, the Hittite ruler reacted with outrage. He believed that Egypt was responsible for what had happened to his son. Whether this belief reflected reliable evidence or the emotions of a grieving father is impossible to determine today. The historical record offers no detailed explanation. No official investigation survives. No eyewitness account has been preserved. Only the aftermath remains. This silence lies at the heart of the mystery. Ancient Egypt usually recorded important political events with remarkable care. Major diplomatic relationships, military victories, and royal achievements often appeared in inscriptions or official monuments. Yet the circumstances surrounding Prince Ananza's death are strikingly absent from the Egyptian record. That absence raises difficult questions. Was the event intentionally omitted? Were records later destroyed? Or were they simply lost over thousands of years through natural decay? Without definitive evidence, historians must rely on fragments preserved outside Egypt. Those foreign accounts reveal the Hittite perspective, but every historical source reflects the knowledge and priorities of the people who created it. This makes interpretation especially challenging. Researchers must distinguish between confirmed facts and reasonable possibilities. The confirmed facts are relatively few. A widowed Egyptian queen requested a Hittite prince. The Hittite court investigated the request. Prince Ananza began the journey. He died before reaching Egypt. Everything beyond those points becomes increasingly uncertain. One possibility is that political instability inside Egypt made the prince's arrival unacceptable to influential groups. The Egyptian throne represented enormous authority, and not everyone may have welcomed the idea of a foreign prince becoming ruler. Powerful officials, military leaders, or members of the royal court could have held very different visions for Egypt's future. The summary of this period consistently points toward uncertainty surrounding succession. Several rulers appeared briefly. Political authority shifted rapidly. Questions surrounding legitimate inheritance remained unresolved. Against that background, the arrival of an outsider could have intensified existing tensions. Of course, historians cannot confirm that this happened. The surviving evidence simply does not allow such certainty. Another possibility is that the prince's death resulted from circumstances unrelated to political conspiracy. Ancient travel itself carried enormous risks. Long journeys crossed difficult terrain, unfamiliar territories, and regions where communication was limited. Even carefully planned diplomatic missions faced dangers that modern travelers rarely consider. Yet because of the extraordinary political importance of this mission, many historians continue asking whether ordinary explanations fully account for what happened. The unanswered questions have become almost as significant as the event itself. The Hittite king's reaction demonstrates how seriously the incident was viewed. From his perspective, the death of a royal son during a diplomatic mission demanded an explanation. Without one, suspicion naturally filled the gap. Diplomatic trust, once damaged, is difficult to rebuild. Instead of strengthening relations between two great kingdoms, the proposed alliance dissolved into uncertainty and resentment. This episode also reveals how fragile political stability could be, even within civilizations that appeared immensely powerful. Ancient Egypt is often remembered through images of monumental pyramids, magnificent temples, and confident pharaohs. Those achievements suggest permanence, but behind the stone monuments stood governments led by individuals making difficult decisions under uncertain conditions. Royal succession was rarely just a family matter. It influenced military leadership, religious authority, economic stability, and international diplomacy. Every transition carried risks. Every unanswered question created opportunities for competing ambitions. Prince Ananza became caught in one of those uncertain moments. Ironically, he is remembered today not for ruling Egypt, but for never reaching it. His story survives because of what failed to happen rather than what actually occurred. That makes him one of the most unusual figures connected to ancient Egyptian history. He occupies an important place within the historical narrative despite leaving behind almost no direct legacy of his own. Modern archaeology has transformed our understanding of many ancient mysteries through new discoveries and improved technology. Damaged inscriptions can sometimes be reconstructed. Ancient texts become easier to analyze. Archaeological excavations continue revealing forgotten details about royal courts and diplomatic relationships. Yet despite these advances, the mystery surrounding Prince Ananza remains largely unresolved. No discovery has provided the missing explanation historians continue seeking. Instead, each new piece of evidence tends to refine the broader historical picture, while leaving the central question unanswered. What truly happened during that journey? The absence of certainty reminds us that history is not simply a collection of completed stories, it is an ongoing investigation. Researchers constantly compare evidence, reassess interpretations, and remain willing to revise conclusions when stronger information emerges. The story of Prince Ananza illustrates that process perfectly. Rather than presenting one definitive answer, historians acknowledge the limits of the available evidence. That careful approach is essential, because ancient history often survives only in fragments. A damaged inscription, a diplomatic letter, a foreign chronicle. Each contributes something valuable while leaving important gaps. Those gaps should not be filled with speculation presented as fact. Instead, they invite thoughtful investigation. Perhaps that is why the mystery continues to capture attention after more than 3,000 years. It combines international diplomacy, royal succession, political uncertainty, and the silence of incomplete records into a single, unforgettable episode. The questions remain remarkably simple. Who benefited from the prince's absence? Could his arrival really have changed Egypt's future, or was history altered by an event whose true cause has vanished forever? No surviving inscription answers those questions. No monument explains the prince's final days. Only scattered records remain, preserving the outline of a diplomatic mission that promised to unite two kingdoms, but instead became one of ancient Egypt's most enduring historical mysteries. The disappearance of Queen Nefertiti, Egypt's most famous queen who simply vanished. Few names from ancient Egypt are as instantly recognizable as Nefertiti. Her iconic likeness has become one of history's most celebrated symbols of beauty and royal power. Museums, books, and documentaries have introduced millions of people to her remarkable image, making her one of the most famous women of the ancient world. Yet behind that familiar face lies one of Egypt's greatest historical mysteries. At the height of her influence, Nefertiti stood beside Pharaoh Akhenaten during one of the most dramatic transformations in Egyptian history. She appeared prominently in royal art, participated in important ceremonies, and occupied a position unlike that of many queens before her. Then, almost without warning, she disappeared from the historical record. No detailed explanation survives. No official account describes her final years. One of the most visible figures in Egypt simply fades into silence. For historians, that silence raises an obvious question. What happened to Queen Nefertiti? To understand why her disappearance remains so puzzling, it helps to appreciate the extraordinary role she played during Akhenaten's reign. This was a period marked by sweeping political and religious change. Traditional institutions were challenged, new priorities emerged, and Egypt entered an era unlike any other in its long history. Throughout much of this transformation, Nefertiti appears as a central figure. Royal artwork repeatedly depicts her standing alongside the pharaoh, suggesting a level of visibility rarely seen for Egyptian queens. Rather than remaining in the background, she appears actively involved in the public image of the royal family. This prominence makes her disappearance even more remarkable. Ordinarily, someone occupying such an important position would continue appearing in official records, particularly during moments of political transition. Instead, references to Nefertiti become increasingly difficult to trace. The surviving evidence grows quieter, her name appears less frequently. Eventually, certainty gives way to speculation. Historians have proposed several possibilities over the years, but the available evidence does not support one universally accepted conclusion. One possibility is that Nefertiti died during Akhenaten's reign. If that happened, the surviving records simply failed to preserve clear details surrounding her death. Ancient Egypt recorded many royal events with impressive care, but countless documents have also been lost over thousands of years. Time, environmental damage, and later political changes have erased enormous portions of the historical record. Another possibility is that Nefertiti continued to play an important role under a different royal identity. This idea has generated considerable discussion because the period following Akhenaten's reign contains several uncertainties surrounding succession and leadership. The fragmented nature of surviving inscriptions makes it difficult to determine exactly who held authority during those turbulent years. Some researchers have wondered whether changing titles or damaged records may have complicated modern interpretations. However, these ideas remain subjects of careful scholarly debate rather than established fact. The evidence simply does not allow historians to reach complete agreement. This uncertainty reflects one of the greatest challenges in studying ancient Egypt. History rarely survives as a complete story. Instead, archaeologists recover scattered fragments that must be assembled with extraordinary care. A damaged inscription may preserve only part of a royal title. A monument may lose the section containing a crucial name. A tomb may survive while its written records disappear forever. Each missing piece creates uncertainty. The mystery surrounding Nefertiti is strengthened by another important factor. Later rulers sometimes reshaped the historical record. Throughout Egyptian history, names could be removed from monuments, inscriptions altered, and official memories carefully rewritten. Political transitions often encourage new rulers to emphasize their own legitimacy while reducing the visibility of previous regimes. Because Akhenaten's period represented such an unusual chapter in Egyptian history, later generations may have had reasons to reshape how it was remembered. Whether this directly affected Nefertiti's historical visibility remains uncertain, but it is a possibility historians continue to consider. The disappearance of her name, therefore, cannot automatically be interpreted as evidence of one specific event. It may reflect political decisions. It may reflect incomplete preservation. It may reflect circumstances that modern archaeology has simply not yet uncovered. Every possibility must be weighed against the surviving evidence. This careful balance between evidence and uncertainty defines responsible historical research. Rather than filling gaps with dramatic conclusions, historians acknowledge what can and cannot be established. In the case of Nefertiti, the confirmed facts are surprisingly limited. She occupied an exceptionally prominent position during Akhenaten's reign. She appeared frequently in royal representations. Then the historical record becomes increasingly silent. Everything beyond that point requires careful interpretation. Modern archaeological discoveries occasionally reshape our understanding of ancient Egypt. New inscriptions are uncovered. Damaged monuments are restored. Improved technology allows researchers to examine artifacts in greater detail than ever before. Each discovery carries the possibility of answering long-standing questions. For Nefertiti, however, the central mystery remains unresolved. Despite decades of research, no single discovery has fully explained her disappearance. That enduring uncertainty has made her one of the most fascinating figures in Egyptian history. Unlike rulers whose lives are documented from beginning to end, Nefertiti leaves historians standing before an unfinished story. The opening chapters are vivid. The conclusion is missing. Perhaps that is why her mystery continues to attract such widespread attention. People naturally seek complete narratives. We expect important historical figures to leave equally important records behind them. When those records suddenly stop, curiosity grows. The absence itself becomes part of the story. Nefertiti's disappearance also reminds us that even the most famous individuals can become surprisingly difficult to understand across thousands of years. Modern fame does not necessarily reflect historical completeness. Her image survives in extraordinary detail. Her life does not. The contrast is striking. We recognize her face immediately. Yet some of the most important questions about her final years remain unanswered. Who witnessed her last days? What role, if any, did she continue to play during Egypt's uncertain political transition? Why do the records become so quiet at precisely the moment historians most wish they were complete? No surviving inscription provides those answers. Instead, archaeologists continue piecing together fragments from one of Egypt's most complicated eras, hoping that each new discovery might illuminate another small corner of the past. Until then, Queen Nefertiti remains suspended between history and mystery, a ruler whose presence once dominated Egypt's royal court, yet whose disappearance continues to challenge historians more than 3,000 years later. Her story is not remarkable because of what is known. It is remarkable because so much of it still remains hidden. The suspicious death of Tutankhamun, a young king, and an unfinished story. Few rulers in history have achieved the level of fame enjoyed by Tutankhamun. Ironically, his reputation is not built upon a long reign or sweeping military victories. Instead, it rests largely on one extraordinary archaeological discovery and one question that continues to intrigue historians. How did Egypt's young pharaoh die? When Howard Carter uncovered Tutankhamun's remarkably preserved tomb in 1922, the discovery transformed the modern understanding of ancient Egypt. Hidden beneath layers of debris in the Valley of the Kings, The burial chamber contained an astonishing collection of treasures that had survived for more than 3,000 years. Golden furniture, jewelry, weapons, ceremonial objects, and, most importantly, the remarkably preserved mummy of the young king himself. For the first time, researchers had an opportunity to study one of Egypt's most famous rulers in extraordinary detail. Yet instead of providing immediate answers, the discovery introduced an entirely new mystery. Tutankhamun became pharaoh during one of the most politically uncertain periods in Egyptian history. The kingdom was still adjusting after the dramatic changes introduced during the reign of Akhenaten. Questions of succession, authority, and political stability remained unresolved, and the royal court was navigating a complicated transition. Despite sitting on Egypt's throne, Tutankhamun was still very young. Experienced advisors and influential officials almost certainly played important roles in guiding the government during his reign. This reality has led historians to examine not only the young king himself, but also the powerful individuals who surrounded him. When Tutankhamun died unexpectedly, Egypt once again faced uncertainty. A ruler's death always carried enormous consequences. The throne represented far more than personal authority. It influenced religion, diplomacy, military leadership, and the stability of the entire kingdom. Whenever succession became unclear, opportunities emerged for ambitious figures within the royal court. This broader political context helps explain why Tutankhamun's death has attracted so much attention. The surviving evidence confirms that the young king died unexpectedly. What it does not clearly explain is why. For many years, numerous theories circulated regarding the circumstances surrounding his death. Some suggested illness, others proposed an accident. Still others wondered whether political motives could have played a role. The summary of this period identifies his death as suspicious, reflecting the uncertainty that still surrounds the available evidence. What makes the mystery especially challenging is the limited historical record. Ancient Egypt preserved remarkable achievements in architecture, religion, and administration, yet personal details surrounding royal deaths were not always recorded in ways that satisfy modern historical investigation. Official inscriptions generally celebrated kings rather than documenting uncertainty. As a result, historians must rely on archaeology, physical evidence, and fragmented historical records rather than complete written accounts. Tutankhamun's mummy therefore became one of the most carefully studied royal remains in history. Over the decades, advances in scientific technology have allowed researchers to examine the young pharaoh in ways that earlier generations could never have imagined. Modern imaging techniques have revealed remarkable details about his body, while helping historians better understand his health and physical condition. Each new examination has contributed valuable information. At the same time, every discovery has also demonstrated how difficult it can be to reconstruct events that occurred more than 3,000 years ago. Evidence rarely speaks with complete certainty. A single finding may support multiple interpretations. Researchers must carefully distinguish between observations and conclusions. This measured approach has gradually reshaped discussions surrounding Tutankhamun's death. Rather than embracing dramatic explanations without sufficient evidence, historians increasingly emphasize the complexity of the available data. Some possibilities appear more likely than others, yet absolute certainty remains out of reach. This uncertainty reflects an important principle of historical research. The absence of a definitive answer does not justify replacing evidence with speculation. Instead, responsible historians acknowledge where the evidence ends. Tutankhamun's death remains mysterious, precisely because the surviving information does not permit one universally accepted explanation. That restraint may seem less dramatic, but it produces a far more accurate understanding of the past. Political circumstances also continue to influence discussions surrounding the young king. Whenever a ruler dies unexpectedly during a period of transition, historians naturally examine who benefited from the change. This does not imply wrongdoing. Rather, it reflects the reality that royal succession often reshaped political relationships. Powerful advisors, senior officials, members of the royal family, each occupied positions that could become increasingly significant following the death of a monarch. The historical record from this period reveals several figures whose influence would grow after Tutankhamun's reign. Understanding those transitions helps historians appreciate the broader environment in which the young king lived and died. The mystery therefore extends beyond one individual. It reflects an entire kingdom navigating uncertainty. Tutankhamun himself may have ruled Egypt, but the government surrounding him consisted of experienced administrators, military leaders, religious authorities, and court officials whose decisions affected the future of the dynasty. That complexity reminds us that ancient kingdoms were governed by people rather than monuments. Behind every temple inscription stood political realities rarely carved into stone. One reason Tutankhamun continues to fascinate audiences is the remarkable contrast between what survives and what remains unknown. His tomb is among the most complete royal burials ever discovered. Thousands of objects reveal extraordinary craftsmanship and provide vivid insights into Egyptian culture. Yet despite possessing this unparalleled archaeological treasure, historians still cannot answer one of the simplest questions about the king himself. How did his life end? It is a striking reminder that spectacular discoveries do not always produce complete historical certainty. Sometimes the greatest archaeological finds reveal how much has been lost rather than how much has been preserved. Every artifact recovered from Tutankhamun's tomb enriches our understanding of ancient Egypt. At the same time, each unanswered question highlights the limitations imposed by time. Documents disappear. Witnesses are forgotten. Political events reshape official memory. Centuries pass. Modern archaeology can recover remarkable pieces of the puzzle, but some sections remain permanently missing. That reality has made Tutankhamun's story one of history's most enduring mysteries. Not because the evidence encourages sensational conclusions, but because it invites careful investigation without promising complete resolution. Researchers continue studying every available clue, hoping that future discoveries or improved analytical techniques may someday clarify what happened to Egypt's young king. Until then, Tutankhamun remains an extraordinary paradox. He is simultaneously one of the best-known pharaohs in the world and one of the least understood when it comes to the circumstances of his death. His golden mask has become a symbol of ancient Egypt itself, yet behind that familiar image stands a young ruler whose final chapter remains unfinished. Thousands of years after his burial, the treasures of his tomb continue to captivate millions of visitors, while the mystery surrounding his death quietly reminds us that even history's brightest discoveries cannot illuminate every shadow left behind by the ancient world. The harem conspiracy, the plot against Ramses III among all the mysteries of ancient Egypt, few are as unsettling as a conspiracy that appears to have reached the very heart of the royal palace. For centuries, Egyptian pharaohs projected an image of absolute authority. Their temples celebrated divine power, their monuments emphasized stability, and their inscriptions portrayed kings as rulers chosen to maintain order across the land. Yet even within those magnificent palaces, power could become fragile. The reign of Ramses III is remembered as one of the last great chapters of Egypt's new kingdom. He inherited a kingdom with a long tradition of military strength, monumental construction, and royal prestige. From the outside, his reign appeared to continue that legacy. Behind the palace walls, however, the political atmosphere may have been far more complicated. According to surviving records, a group of individuals became involved in what is now known as the harem conspiracy, an organized attempt to change the future of the Egyptian throne. Unlike many ancient mysteries that survive only through scattered archaeological fragments, this event is supported by historical documents that describe legal proceedings connected to the conspiracy. Even so, many of the most important questions remain unanswered. Who organized the plot? How extensive was it? And perhaps most importantly, did the conspiracy achieve its ultimate objective? The available evidence suggests that the central figure behind the plan was Queen Tiye, one of Ramses III's wives. According to the surviving accounts, she hoped to place her own son, Prince Pentuer, on the throne instead of the king's chosen successor. In ancient Egypt, royal succession carried enormous significance. Choosing the next pharaoh was not simply a family matter. It determined the future leadership of the kingdom, the direction of religious authority, and the stability of one of the world's greatest civilizations. Whenever succession became uncertain, political tensions naturally increased. Those tensions appear to have formed the backdrop for this extraordinary conspiracy. The surviving judicial records describe a remarkably complex investigation involving members of the royal household, palace officials, and other individuals connected to the court. Rather than portraying a single isolated act, the documents suggest coordinated planning involving multiple participants. For historians, this alone is remarkable. Ancient Egyptian records often celebrated victories and royal achievements. Here, however, we find evidence of an internal political crisis unfolding within the palace itself. The investigation that followed appears unusually detailed by ancient standards. Officials questioned those believed to be involved. Trials were conducted, judgments were recorded. These legal documents provide historians with one of the clearest glimpses into how ancient Egypt responded to an alleged attempt against the monarchy. Yet despite these surviving records, one question continues to dominate discussion. Did Ramses III survive the conspiracy? For many years, historians debated this issue. The judicial documents clearly describe the investigation, but they do not provide an entirely straightforward account of the king's final moments. This uncertainty persisted for generations. Only much later did advances in scientific research allow investigators to study the mummy of Ramses III using modern technology. Those examinations provided valuable new information, helping historians better understand the circumstances surrounding the king's death. The results strengthen the view that the conspiracy may indeed have achieved its most significant objective. Even with these discoveries, however, the complete sequence of events remains uncertain. Exactly how the conspiracy unfolded inside the palace is still impossible to reconstruct with complete confidence. The surviving evidence offers important clues without revealing every detail. That pattern appears repeatedly throughout Egyptian history. Major political events often survive only in fragments. Official records preserve certain moments while leaving others unexplained. The result is a historical narrative filled with both remarkable insights and enduring mysteries. The harem conspiracy also reminds us that royal courts were rarely united. Although pharaohs possessed extraordinary authority, they ruled within complex political environments. Queens, princes, senior officials, military leaders, priests, and administrators all occupied influential positions. Each group brought its own interests and ambitions. Most of the time, these competing interests remained hidden beneath the appearance of royal stability. Occasionally, however, those tensions emerged in dramatic ways. The alleged conspiracy against Ramses III appears to have been one such moment. What makes this episode particularly fascinating is the contrast between Egypt's public image and its private political reality. The monuments of Ramses III emphasize strength. Temple walls celebrate royal achievements. Official art presents an orderly kingdom guided by divine authority. The judicial records tell a different story. They reveal concern, investigation, accusation, legal proceedings. Instead of perfect stability, they suggest a government responding to one of the most serious internal challenges of the period. This difference highlights an important principle of historical research. Monuments often communicate ideals. Administrative records sometimes reveal reality. Both are valuable, but each serves a different purpose. Historians therefore compare multiple types of evidence before drawing conclusions. In the case of the harem conspiracy, archaeology, written records, and scientific examination of the king's remains all contribute pieces of the larger picture. No single source tells the complete story. Together, however, they reveal an episode unlike almost any other in ancient Egyptian history. Another enduring mystery concerns the motivations of those involved. Political ambition certainly appears to have played an important role. If Prince Pentuer could become pharaoh, the balance of power within the royal family would change dramatically. Yet historians must be careful not to assume motives beyond what the surviving evidence supports. The judicial documents identify participants in legal actions, but they cannot fully reveal private conversations, personal relationships, or individual intentions. Those aspects disappeared with the people themselves. The figure of Prince Pentuer remains especially intriguing. His name is forever linked to one of Egypt's most famous royal conspiracies, yet many details surrounding his own role remain uncertain. How actively was he involved? How much influence did he possess? To what extent did others act on his behalf? The available evidence leaves room for careful interpretation, but not complete certainty. Perhaps that uncertainty explains why this story continues to attract historians. Unlike legendary tales built entirely upon myth, the harem conspiracy rests upon genuine historical records. The conspiracy was real enough to trigger official investigations, real enough to produce legal documents, real enough to leave traces that survived more than 3,000 years. Yet even with those remarkable sources, crucial questions remain unanswered. That combination of evidence and mystery makes the episode uniquely compelling. It demonstrates both the strengths and limitations of archaeology. Modern science can examine royal remains with extraordinary precision. Ancient documents can reveal political events with surprising detail. Still, history sometimes refuses to provide complete explanations. There will always be moments when the evidence stops just short of certainty. The harem conspiracy stands as one of those moments. It reminds us that ancient Egypt was not simply a civilization of pyramids and temples. It was also a kingdom shaped by human decisions, political rivalries, and struggles for power that unfolded behind closed palace doors. Ramses III may have ruled one of history's greatest civilizations, but even a powerful pharaoh could not completely escape the uncertainties of succession and ambition. Thousands of years later, the conspiracy remains one of Egypt's most remarkable historical mysteries, not because every answer has been found, but because enough evidence survives to show that something extraordinary happened inside the royal palace, while leaving just enough unanswered questions to keep historians searching for the complete story. The violent death of Seqenenre-Tao II, the pharaoh who fought for Egypt, ancient Egypt, is often remembered for its magnificent temples, towering pyramids, and centuries of remarkable stability. Yet there were moments when the kingdom stood on the edge of survival. One of those moments is forever connected to a pharaoh whose final days remain among the most compelling mysteries in Egyptian history. His name was Seqenenre-Tao II. Unlike many rulers whose reigns are remembered through grand building projects or prosperous decades of peace, Seqenenre-Tao II became associated with one defining question: what truly happened to him? He ruled during a period when Egypt was deeply divided. Political authority was no longer concentrated under a single unified government. Different powers controlled different regions, creating uncertainty that affected both the royal court and the future of the kingdom. Leadership during such times required difficult decisions. Every political move carried enormous consequences. Every military action risked altering the balance of power. Seqenenre-Tao II emerged as one of the central figures during this turbulent chapter. His reign appears closely connected to efforts aimed at restoring Egypt's independence and strengthening royal authority. Although many details of his campaigns have been lost over time, historians recognize that his leadership unfolded during one of the kingdom's most challenging eras. Then, suddenly, his reign came to an end. For centuries, historians possessed only fragments of information regarding his death. Ancient inscriptions provided limited detail, and the surviving historical record left significant gaps. Like so many mysteries of ancient Egypt, certainty seemed permanently out of reach. Everything changed when modern researchers gained the opportunity to examine the pharaoh's mummy. Unlike written records, physical remains sometimes preserve evidence that survives for thousands of years. Scientific analysis can reveal information unavailable to ancient historians. It can offer clues about health, age, and, in some cases, the circumstances surrounding death. The examination of Seqenenre-Tao II's mummy immediately attracted attention. Researchers discovered evidence suggesting that his death had not been peaceful. The findings indicated that the pharaoh had experienced a violent end, making him one of the few Egyptian rulers whose remains appear to preserve direct evidence of a dramatic final chapter. Even so, the physical evidence raises almost as many questions as it answers. How exactly did those events unfold? Where did they occur? Was the pharaoh leading his forces in battle? Was he captured during conflict? Or did something entirely different happen? The available evidence does not provide complete certainty. Instead, historians must carefully combine archaeological findings with the limited written sources that survive. This careful process illustrates one of archaeology's greatest strengths. Rather than relying upon a single source, researchers compare multiple forms of evidence. Ancient inscriptions provide historical context. Scientific examinations reveal physical details. Political history helps explain the broader environment. Together, these pieces create a clearer picture while acknowledging the limits of certainty. The period surrounding Seqenenre-Tao II was marked by instability. Leadership required confronting challenges that extended far beyond ordinary administration. Military conflict, shifting political authority, and regional rivalries all influenced the decisions made by Egypt's rulers. Within that environment, the death of a pharaoh carried enormous consequences. A king represented continuity. His leadership symbolized stability. When that leadership ended unexpectedly, uncertainty often followed. Successors inherited not only the throne but also the unresolved struggles facing the kingdom. The mystery surrounding Seconra-Tal II therefore extends beyond his personal story. His death became part of a larger historical turning point. Researchers view his reign as one chapter within Egypt's broader effort to overcome political division and restore centralized authority. Understanding his final days helps illuminate that wider transformation. Yet the available evidence remains incomplete. Ancient history rarely offers perfect documentation. Many official records disappeared long ago. Others survive only as damaged fragments. Natural erosion, human activity, and the passage of thousands of years have erased countless details that historians would dearly like to recover. As a result, every surviving artifact becomes immensely valuable. The mummy of Seconra-Tal II represents one such artifact. It provides an unusually direct connection to a ruler who lived more than 3 millennia ago. Scientific examination has revealed information impossible to obtain from written records alone. At the same time, it demonstrates the limits of physical evidence. Bones and preserved tissues can suggest what happened. They cannot fully explain why it happened. That distinction remains essential. Responsible historical research avoids presenting possibilities as established fact. Instead, historians evaluate competing interpretations while recognizing where uncertainty remains. In the case of Seconra-Tal II, several possibilities have been discussed over the years. Some interpretations emphasize the likelihood that his death occurred during military conflict. Others consider alternative circumstances consistent with the available evidence. Because no surviving eyewitness account exists, none of these explanations can be accepted with complete confidence. That uncertainty is precisely what continues to fascinate researchers. Unlike legends built entirely upon folklore, this mystery is grounded in tangible archaeological evidence. The Pharaohs' remains are real. The political instability surrounding his reign is well recognized. The unanswered questions arise not from imagination, but from the incomplete nature of the historical record. This combination of evidence and uncertainty makes Seconra-Tal II one of ancient Egypt's most compelling historical figures. His story also reminds us that leadership in the ancient world demanded extraordinary resilience. Pharaohs were often portrayed as powerful, almost untouchable figures chosen to preserve order across the kingdom. Official monuments emphasized confidence and divine authority. Reality could be far more difficult. Kings governed during periods of prosperity as well as crisis. They faced military threats, political challenges, and decisions whose consequences extended far beyond their own lifetimes. Seconra-Tal II appears to have ruled during exactly such a period. Whether directing campaigns, maintaining alliances, or attempting to unify a divided kingdom, every decision carried immense weight. His mysterious death therefore reflects not only the fate of one individual, but also the uncertainty surrounding an entire era. Modern technology continues to improve historians' understanding of ancient remains. Advanced imaging, forensic analysis, and archaeological research regularly produce new insights into long-standing mysteries. Each improvement encourages researchers to revisit old evidence with fresh perspectives. Yet, despite these advances, some historical questions remain resistant to definitive answers. The death of Seconra-Tal II is one of them. Researchers have learned far more today than earlier generations ever imagined possible. Even so, the complete story remains just beyond reach. Perhaps that is what makes this mystery so enduring. The evidence is substantial enough to inspire careful investigation, yet incomplete enough to prevent absolute certainty. Every discovery contributes another piece to the puzzle without fully completing it. Thousands of years after his reign ended, Seconra-Tal II continues to stand at the intersection of archaeology, history, and mystery. His story reminds us that challenge timelines. Even the ruins of one of the world's greatest civilizations could leave behind unanswered questions. Stone monuments may preserve names. Royal tombs may survive beneath desert sands. Scientific research may uncover remarkable details. But history sometimes keeps its greatest secrets, allowing only fragments of the truth to reach the present. For Seconra-Tal II, those fragments continue to tell the story of a king who ruled during one of Egypt's most difficult chapters, and whose mysterious death still challenges historians to separate certainty from silence. The civil war of Seti II and Amenmesse, when two pharaohs claimed one throne. Ancient Egypt is often imagined as a civilization of perfect order, where each pharaoh peacefully passed the throne to the next. Monumental temples and carefully carved inscriptions reinforce that image, presenting royal succession as smooth, unquestioned, and divinely ordained. The reality, however, could be very different. One of the clearest examples comes from a period when Egypt appears to have had not one undisputed ruler, but two competing kings. Their names were Seti II and Amenmesse. For historians, the relationship between these two rulers remains one of the most fascinating political puzzles in Egyptian history, because the surviving evidence suggests a struggle for legitimacy that official records never fully explain. The mystery begins with the death of a previous ruler. As was often the case in ancient Egypt, the transition of power became a defining moment. A stable succession could preserve order across the kingdom, while uncertainty could create opportunities for rival claims and political division. Somewhere during this transition, the historical record becomes unexpectedly complicated. Instead of presenting one clear royal line, inscriptions begin revealing the names of both Seti II and Amenmesse. At first glance, that may not seem unusual. Egypt's long history included many pharaohs. Yet closer examination reveals something remarkable. The evidence suggests that these two rulers may have claimed authority over Egypt during the same general period. This immediately raises an obvious question. How could one kingdom have two pharaohs? The answer remains uncertain. Unlike many famous rulers whose reigns are well documented, the surviving evidence surrounding Seti II and Amenmesse is fragmented. Damaged monuments, incomplete inscriptions, and conflicting archaeological discoveries have left historians trying to reconstruct events from scattered pieces rather than complete records. Some evidence indicates that Amenmesse exercised royal authority. His name appears on monuments. He adopted the titles expected of a pharaoh. Official inscriptions associated with him suggest that he ruled with the confidence expected of Egypt's highest office. At the same time, Seti II also appears as the legitimate ruler in other surviving records. His monuments, inscriptions, and later recognition suggest that he ultimately secured broader acceptance as king. The existence of both sets of evidence has led historians to one of several possible conclusions. Perhaps Egypt experienced a genuine struggle for the throne. Perhaps different regions recognized different rulers. Or perhaps the sequence of events unfolded in a way that modern researchers have not yet fully reconstructed. The available evidence simply does not provide enough information to eliminate every possibility. That uncertainty makes this period especially challenging to study. Ancient Egypt generally invested enormous effort in presenting the monarchy as stable and divinely protected. Official monuments rarely emphasized internal conflict. Instead, they celebrated continuity, order, and royal authority. When political disputes did occur, later rulers sometimes reshaped the historical record to strengthen their own legitimacy. Names could disappear. Monuments might be altered. Achievements could be reassigned. As a result, historians must always consider whether the surviving evidence reflects events as they happened, or as later governments wished them to be remembered. This possibility becomes particularly important when examining the reign of Amenmesse. His historical visibility appears unusually limited compared with many other pharaohs. Some inscriptions associated with him seem to have been altered or replaced over time. For researchers, this raises another important question. Was this simply the result of natural damage across thousands of years? Or did later political decisions contribute to the disappearance of parts of his historical legacy? No definitive answer exists. The surviving evidence supports careful discussion, but not absolute certainty. Seti II's position appears somewhat clearer because his reign ultimately became part of the accepted royal succession. Even so, many questions remain regarding exactly how his authority was established. Did he immediately control the entire kingdom? Did he gradually consolidate power? Or did the political situation evolve through negotiations, shifting alliances, and changing loyalties within the royal court? History offers only fragments. Those fragments, however, reveal something deeply human about political leadership. The struggle between Seti II and Amenmesse reminds us that even one of the world's greatest civilizations was not immune to uncertainty. Kingship depended not only upon tradition, but also upon recognition. Power required acceptance from officials, administrators, religious leaders, and regional authorities. Without that support, even a royal claim could become contested. This broader context helps explain why historians continue studying the period so carefully. The question is not simply which ruler came first, it is how ancient Egypt managed one of its most uncertain political transitions. Archaeology plays a central role in answering that question. Researchers compare inscriptions from temples, examine damaged cartouches, study the locations of monuments, and analyze the sequence of construction projects. Each discovery adds another small piece to the larger historical puzzle. Sometimes a single inscription slightly adjusts the accepted timeline. Sometimes a newly examined monument raises entirely new questions. This gradual accumulation of evidence reflects how historical understanding evolves. Unlike dramatic fictional stories that conclude with a single revelation, archaeology advances through patience. Every artifact contributes information. Every excavation refines previous interpretations. Every discovery must be evaluated alongside decades of existing research. The mystery surrounding Seti II and Amenmès illustrates that process perfectly. Instead of producing one universally accepted explanation, the evidence encourages continued investigation. That ongoing debate is not a weakness. It is one of the strengths of responsible historical research. Rather than forcing certainty where none exists, historians openly acknowledge competing interpretations. This careful approach allows new discoveries to reshape understanding without discarding the evidence already collected. The political uncertainty surrounding these rival rulers also reflects a broader truth about ancient Egypt. Although temples projected permanence and royal monuments celebrated divine authority, governments were ultimately led by people. People formed alliances, people disagreed, people competed for influence. Behind every carefully carved inscription stood individuals making decisions under difficult circumstances. The apparent rivalry between Seti II and Amenmès offers a rare glimpse into those hidden realities. Instead of a perfectly orderly succession, historians encounter competing claims, incomplete records, and unanswered questions. The silence within the historical record becomes almost as important as the surviving inscriptions themselves. Why were certain records preserved while others disappeared? Why do some monuments seem to tell different stories? Were those differences intentional, accidental, or simply the result of thousands of years passing? No single answer satisfies every piece of evidence. Perhaps that is why this mystery continues to fascinate scholars today. Unlike many ancient legends, the story is grounded in authentic archaeological discoveries, real monuments, real royal names, real historical uncertainty. Yet despite generations of research, the complete narrative remains just beyond reach. Seti II ultimately secured his place within Egypt's accepted royal history. Amenmès remains a far more elusive figure, his reign surrounded by unanswered questions that continue to challenge researchers. Together, they represent one of ancient Egypt's most intriguing political mysteries, a time when the throne itself became uncertain, when official records grew complicated, and when the world's greatest civilization briefly revealed that even its kings were not always protected from rivalry, ambition, and the unpredictable course of history. The fall of Ramses XI, the pharaoh who watched royal authority fade for much of ancient Egypt's history. The pharaoh stood at the center of everything. He was the kingdom's highest political authority, the protector of religious tradition, and the symbol of national unity. Monumental temples, vast construction projects, and carefully organized administrations all reinforced the image of a ruler whose authority reached every corner of the land. By the time Ramses XI came to the throne, that image was beginning to change. His reign marks one of the most mysterious and transformative periods in Egyptian history, not because of a single dramatic event, but because of a gradual shift in power that unfolded almost silently. Unlike the sudden death of a king or a violent struggle for succession, the decline during Ramses XI's reign happened slowly. It was a change that left few dramatic moments for historians to point to, yet its consequences would reshape Egypt for generations. The question is not simply what happened during his reign. The greater mystery is why royal authority weakened so dramatically. Ramses XI inherited a kingdom with an extraordinary past. The new kingdom had produced some of Egypt's most celebrated rulers, impressive military achievements, and magnificent monuments that still stand today. Yet beneath those achievements, new political realities were emerging. The institutions that had once operated under clear royal leadership were becoming increasingly complex. Power was no longer concentrated as completely in the hands of the pharaoh as it had been during earlier generations. The surviving evidence suggests that influential officials and regional authorities began exercising greater independence. Exactly how this transition unfolded remains difficult to determine. Ancient records rarely announce that a kingdom is losing central control. Official inscriptions continue to present the monarchy with dignity and authority. From the perspective of public monuments, Egypt still appeared stable. History, however, often hides its greatest changes beneath appearances. The challenge for historians is identifying those quieter transformations. Rather than relying on one dramatic event, researchers examine administrative records, inscriptions, and archaeological evidence that reveal subtle shifts in political influence. During Ramses XI's reign, those shifts become increasingly noticeable. The balance of authority appears to have changed. Individuals outside the throne gained greater prominence. Regional leadership became more significant. The royal government's ability to direct every aspect of the kingdom seems to have diminished. Exactly why this occurred remains one of the central questions surrounding his reign. Was it the result of long-term political evolution? Did earlier periods of instability gradually weaken royal institutions, or did circumstances unique to Ramses XI accelerate changes already underway? The surviving evidence does not provide one definitive explanation. Instead, historians piece together clues from scattered records preserved across different parts of Egypt. One of the most fascinating aspects of this mystery is how quietly it unfolded. Many historical turning points are easy to recognize. Battles, natural disasters, major revolutions. The decline of royal authority under Ramses XI appears very different. It resembles a gradual redistribution of influence rather than a sudden collapse. That makes it far more difficult to reconstruct. Without one defining event, historians must rely upon patterns, changes in official titles, administrative documents, regional inscriptions. The appearance of influential individuals whose authority seems to expand beyond what earlier generations would have expected. Each clue appears small on its own. Together, they suggest that Egypt was entering a new political reality. The pharaoh remained the symbolic head of the kingdom. Yet symbolism and practical authority are not always identical. This distinction lies at the heart of the mystery. How much real power did Ramses XI continue to exercise? The surviving evidence cannot answer that question with complete certainty. Some records continue to recognize him as king. Others highlight the growing importance of powerful officials operating within different parts of the government. Historians therefore avoid simple conclusions. Instead, they examine how authority functioned in practice, rather than relying solely upon royal titles. This careful approach reveals something important about ancient Egypt. Political systems rarely change overnight. Institutions evolve, responsibilities shift, influence gradually moves from one group to another. By the time those changes become obvious, they may have been developing for many years. Ramses XI appears to have ruled during exactly such a transitional period. His reign stands at the boundary between one era and the next. That position makes him an especially important historical figure, even though many details surrounding his government remain uncertain. Another challenge facing researchers is the nature of the surviving evidence itself. Ancient Egypt preserved enormous quantities of information, but much has disappeared through time. Papyrus documents deteriorate, buildings collapse, inscriptions become damaged. Political transitions sometimes reshape which records survive. As a result, historians often work with incomplete archives. Every surviving document becomes valuable. Every newly examined inscription has the potential to refine existing interpretations. This ongoing process means that understanding Ramses XI's reign continues to evolve. New archaeological discoveries occasionally clarify specific aspects of administration or chronology. At the same time, they frequently reveal additional questions. Rather than producing complete certainty, archaeology often deepens appreciation for the complexity of the ancient world. The reign of Ramses XI demonstrates this perfectly. Researchers possess enough evidence to recognize that significant political change occurred. What remains uncertain is the precise sequence of events that produced that transformation. This uncertainty also affects how historians interpret the end of the New Kingdom itself. Historical periods rarely begin and end on exact dates. Instead, transitions unfold gradually. The developments associated with Ramses XI illustrate how difficult it can be to identify the exact moment when one historical era gives way to another. His reign therefore represents more than the story of one individual. It reflects a civilization adapting to changing political realities. The familiar structures that had defined Egyptian government for centuries were evolving. Leadership increasingly depended upon cooperation among powerful institutions rather than unquestioned royal authority alone. This gradual redistribution of influence would shape the future of Egypt long after Ramses XI's reign had ended. Perhaps the greatest lesson from this mystery is that history is not always transformed by spectacular events. Sometimes the most significant changes occur quietly. A title acquires new importance. An official gains additional responsibilities. Regional leaders exercise greater independence. Each development appears modest. Together they alter the direction of an entire civilization. Ramses XI occupies one of those quiet turning points. He ruled during a period when Egypt still possessed its remarkable cultural achievements, its magnificent monuments, and its ancient traditions. Yet beneath that familiar surface, the balance of power was changing. Thousands of years later, historians continue studying his reign because it reveals how even the world's most enduring civilizations experience gradual transformation. Not through one dramatic moment, but through countless decisions, shifting relationships and political adjustments that only become fully visible when viewed across centuries. The mystery surrounding Ramses XI remains compelling, because it reminds us that history is often written not only by what survives, but also by what slowly disappears. Royal authority did not simply vanish overnight. It faded gradually, leaving behind a collection of scattered clues that continue to challenge historians seeking to understand the final years of one of ancient Egypt's greatest royal traditions. Why ancient Egypt still keeps its greatest secrets for more than 5,000 years, ancient Egypt has captured the imagination of humanity. Its pyramids still dominate the desert skyline. Its temples continue to inspire awe. Its monuments preserve the names of kings and queens who ruled thousands of years before the modern world existed. Yet, despite generations of exploration, scientific advances, and archaeological discoveries, one remarkable truth remains. Ancient Egypt still refuses to surrender all of its secrets. That may seem surprising. Modern technology allows researchers to examine mummies without disturbing their wrappings. Satellites can identify buried structures beneath the desert. High-resolution imaging reveals faded inscriptions invisible to the human eye. Archaeologists work alongside specialists in genetics, geology, chemistry, and digital mapping. Never before has humanity possessed so many tools for studying the ancient world. And yet many of Egypt's greatest mysteries remain unsolved. The disappearance of powerful rulers, uncertain royal successions, political conspiracies, violent deaths, forgotten reigns. Entire chapters of history survive only as fragments. Each mystery explored throughout this documentary illustrates the same lesson. History is rarely complete. It is tempting to imagine that archaeology functions like assembling a puzzle, where every missing piece will eventually be found. In reality, archaeology often resembles recovering only a handful of pieces from a puzzle that once contained thousands. Researchers may uncover a single inscription, while the temple that once surrounded it has disappeared forever. A royal tomb may survive while every document describing the ruler's final years has been lost. An administrative record may preserve one event while remaining silent about everything that happened before or after it. Those gaps are not unusual. They are the normal condition of ancient history. Time itself is archaeology's greatest challenge. For thousands of years, buildings collapsed. Floods reshaped landscapes. Earthquakes damaged monuments. Human conflict destroyed cities. Stone blocks were reused in later construction. Papyrus documents decayed naturally. Entire archives vanished long before modern historians ever knew they existed. What survives today represents only a fraction of what ancient Egypt once created. This perspective changes how we view historical certainty. Many people expect historians to provide definitive answers. Sometimes they can. Often they cannot. Responsible historical research is built not upon confidence alone, but upon evidence. When evidence is incomplete, conclusions must remain cautious. That careful approach may appear less dramatic than sensational theories, but it is precisely what allows history to move steadily closer to the truth. Every archaeological discovery begins with questions rather than answers. A damaged inscription, a buried structure, an unfamiliar artifact, each discovery must be carefully documented, compared with existing evidence, and interpreted within its historical context. Rarely does one object solve an entire mystery. Instead, understanding develops gradually. One discovery confirms a date, another clarifies a family relationship, a third explains the purpose of a forgotten building. Piece by piece, history becomes clearer. Yet complete certainty remains surprisingly rare. One reason Egypt continues to fascinate researchers is that every answer often produces new questions. A newly discovered tomb may identify an unknown official. Who appointed him? What role did he play? Why does no other document mention him? A restored inscription may reveal a previously forgotten royal title. Why was it removed? What political circumstances surrounded its creation? Every solution expands the boundaries of inquiry. In this way, archaeology is less about closing mysteries than understanding them more deeply. The stories of Smenkhare-Nefertiti, Tutankhamun, Ramses III, Seqenen-Retau II, Seti II, Amenmese, and Ramses XI all demonstrate this principle. Each ruler occupies an important place within Egyptian history. Each left behind evidence that has survived across millennia. Yet each also reminds us that the ancient world rarely preserves complete biographies. Sometimes a name survives but not a life. Sometimes a monument survives but not the event that inspired it. Sometimes a mummy survives while the written explanation of that person's death disappears forever. These silences are as important as the surviving evidence itself. They remind historians where certainty ends. They also remind us to distinguish between evidence and imagination. Throughout the years, ancient Egypt has inspired countless legends, speculative theories, and dramatic stories. Some are entertaining. Others attract attention precisely because they promise simple explanations for difficult questions. Professional archaeology follows a different path. Rather than asking what could have happened, researchers first ask what the evidence actually supports. That distinction is essential. Speculation may create exciting stories, but evidence creates lasting knowledge. The greatest archaeological discoveries of the past century did not emerge because researchers accepted easy answers. They emerged because investigators patiently examined every available clue. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, the scientific study of royal mummies, the translation of ancient inscriptions, the excavation of forgotten settlements. Each breakthrough resulted from years of careful work rather than dramatic assumptions. Future discoveries will almost certainly reshape our understanding of ancient Egypt once again. New excavation techniques continue to improve. Remote sensing technologies allow researchers to identify buried structures before excavation begins. Digital reconstruction helps scholars restore damaged monuments virtually. Scientific analysis extracts information from artifacts once considered impossible to study. Each advancement increases the possibility that long-standing mysteries may one day become clearer. Perhaps a future excavation will uncover missing administrative archives. Perhaps a forgotten royal tomb still lies hidden beneath the desert sands. Perhaps damaged inscriptions awaiting restoration already contain answers historians have sought for generations. No one can say with certainty. That uncertainty is not a weakness. It is one of archaeology's greatest strengths. Every unanswered question encourages continued exploration. Every mystery inspires another generation of researchers. Every discovery reminds us that history remains an unfinished conversation between the past and the present. Ancient Egypt has survived not because every secret has been revealed, but because enough mysteries remain to keep curiosity alive. Its monuments still stand. Its kings are still remembered. Its language continues to be studied. Its history grows richer with every excavation. Yet beneath the sands of Egypt, countless stories almost certainly remain undiscovered. Some may transform our understanding of familiar rulers. Others may introduce entirely new figures whose names have been forgotten for thousands of years. Until those discoveries are made, ancient Egypt continues to occupy a unique place in human history. It is a civilization both remarkably well-known and profoundly mysterious. A world where magnificent temples coexist with missing records, where famous rulers leave unanswered questions, where every new discovery reveals not only what has been found, but also how much still lies hidden. Perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. Not whether ancient Egypt still holds secrets, but how many remain waiting beneath the sands, preserved by time, patient enough to wait thousands of years for someone to uncover them. Only future discoveries will tell. Epilogue. The next great discovery may already be waiting. Every generation has believed it was close to solving ancient Egypt's greatest mysteries. For centuries, explorers searched for lost temples hidden beneath drifting sands. Archaeologists painstakingly copied weathered inscriptions from crumbling walls. Historians compared fragmented papyrus texts, hoping that one forgotten sentence might answer questions that had endured for thousands of years. And each generation discovered something extraordinary. Yet every discovery also revealed something unexpected. There was always another mystery waiting beyond it. When the Rosetta Stone was deciphered, scholars believed countless secrets would finally become clear. Instead, translating hieroglyphs opened an entirely new world of unanswered questions. Suddenly, historians could read royal decrees, temple inscriptions, personal letters, and administrative records. But they also realized how much had already been lost forever. Entire libraries had vanished. Royal archives had disappeared. Thousands of years of history survived only in scattered fragments. Then came one of archaeology's greatest moments. In 1922, Howard Carter uncovered the nearly intact tomb of Tutankhamun. The discovery shocked the world. For the first time, people could look directly into a royal burial that had remained largely undisturbed since antiquity. Many believed this astonishing discovery would answer nearly every question about Egypt's kings. Instead, it raised entirely new ones. Why had the tomb remained hidden? Why was it smaller than expected for a pharaoh? How had such incredible treasures escaped ancient robbers when so many other royal tombs had not? Even today, researchers continue examining objects from that single discovery, finding details that earlier generations lacked the technology to detect. That pattern repeats throughout Egyptian archaeology. Every answer creates new questions. Every excavation uncovers another mystery. Every generation inherits puzzles left unresolved by the one before it. This is why Egypt remains unlike almost any other civilization on Earth. Many ancient cultures survive only through ruins or scattered artifacts. Egypt preserved monumental architecture on an extraordinary scale. Massive temples still dominate the landscape. Obelisks continue to stand beneath the open sky. Colossal statues gaze across the Nile as they have for millennia. Yet beneath those visible monuments lies another Egypt, one that remains hidden. Modern archaeology increasingly focuses not only on what can be seen, but also on what remains buried. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, three-dimensional mapping, thermal analysis, artificial intelligence capable of recognizing subtle archaeological patterns. These technologies are transforming the search for ancient sites. Researchers can now identify buried structures without turning a single shovel of sand. Entire settlements have been mapped before excavation even begins. Hidden chambers have been investigated using tiny cameras and advanced imaging systems. Mummies can be studied without unwrapping them. Objects sealed inside ancient coffins can sometimes be identified through scanning alone. Just a generation ago, these methods would have seemed impossible. Today, they are becoming standard archaeological tools. This technological revolution offers enormous promise. Some of Egypt's greatest mysteries may eventually be solved not by dramatic discoveries, but by patient scientific investigation. A damaged inscription may be digitally restored. A faded cartouche may reveal a forgotten royal name. An overlooked tomb may connect two historical figures whose relationship has puzzled historians for centuries. Even microscopic traces preserved on ancient artifacts can reveal information about daily life, trade, health, and religious practice. History is becoming more detailed with every advancement, yet one truth remains unchanged. Technology cannot recover what no longer exists. If a document completely decayed thousands of years ago, no machine can recreate its missing words. If witnesses never recorded an event, archaeology may only recover indirect evidence. This is why humility remains one of the most important qualities in historical research. The farther we travel into the past, the more carefully we must separate evidence from assumption. The greatest archaeologists are not remembered because they claimed certainty. They are remembered because they allowed the evidence to guide their conclusions. That discipline protects history from becoming fiction. It reminds us that unanswered questions are not failures. They are invitations to continue searching. Perhaps somewhere beneath Egypt's deserts lies another royal archive waiting to be uncovered. Perhaps an untouched tomb still preserves the story of a forgotten queen. Perhaps a buried temple contains inscriptions capable of resolving debates that have continued for generations. Or perhaps some mysteries will remain unsolved forever. There is something strangely fitting about that possibility. Ancient Egypt was a civilization that believed deeply in eternity. Its monuments were built to outlast generations. Its rulers sought immortality through stone, writing, and memory. In many ways, they succeeded. Thousands of years later, their names are still spoken. Their achievements are still admired. Their mysteries are still investigated. Few civilizations have remained so alive in human imagination for so long. That enduring fascination comes not only from what Egypt has revealed, but from what it continues to conceal. Every visitor who stands before the Great Pyramid experiences the same feeling. Every archaeologist brushing away centuries of sand feels it. Every historian studying faded hieroglyphs recognizes it. There is always another question, another possibility, another hidden chapter waiting to emerge. Perhaps that is the greatest legacy of ancient Egypt. It teaches us that history is never truly finished. The past is not a closed book, but an unfinished manuscript, with missing pages scattered beneath deserts, hidden inside forgotten tombs, and preserved within monuments that have silently watched civilizations rise and fall. As long as those pages remain missing, the search will continue. And somewhere beneath the endless sands of Egypt, the next great discovery may already be waiting. Not for the luckiest explorer, but for the patient researcher willing to ask one more question, examine one more clue, and follow the evidence wherever it leads. Until that day arrives, ancient Egypt will continue to guard its greatest secrets, reminding us that some of history's most powerful stories are not the ones we already know, but the ones that are still waiting to be found. The mysteries that may never be solved. History often gives us the comforting illusion that every question has an answer waiting to be discovered. But ancient Egypt reminds us that this is not always true. Some mysteries endure not because archaeologists have failed, but because time itself has erased too much. Documents decay, cities are abandoned, monuments collapse, entire generations pass without leaving written accounts. By the time modern researchers begin searching for answers, thousands of years have already reshaped the landscape. This raises an uncomfortable but fascinating possibility. What if some of ancient Egypt's greatest secrets are already gone forever? Throughout this documentary, we've explored banished pharaohs, disputed successions, unexplained deaths, political conspiracies, and rulers whose stories simply disappear from the historical record. Each mystery shares one common feature: missing evidence. In archaeology, absence can be just as important as discovery. A missing inscription may suggest deliberate removal, or it may simply reflect centuries of natural erosion. An empty burial chamber could indicate ancient tomb robbers, or perhaps the ruler was buried somewhere else entirely. A forgotten royal name might represent political erasure, or it may be the result of damaged monuments that have yet to be found. Every missing piece forces historians to ask difficult questions. Was the evidence destroyed? Has it not yet been discovered? Or did it never exist in the form modern researchers expect? These uncertainties require extraordinary patience. Professional archaeologists rarely speak in absolutes. Instead, they work with probabilities, comparing evidence from many different sources before reaching careful conclusions. That method may seem slow, but it has transformed our understanding of ancient Egypt. Ideas once accepted as fact have been revised after new discoveries. Long-standing assumptions have been challenged by improved scientific techniques. Entire historical timelines have been adjusted as additional inscriptions came to light. This willingness to change conclusions when new evidence appears is one of archaeology's greatest strengths. It reminds us that history is not fixed. It evolves. Every excavation has the potential to reshape what we think we know. Sometimes the most important discoveries are surprisingly small. A broken pottery fragment bearing a royal seal. A damaged piece of limestone covered in faded hieroglyphs. A forgotten administrative record preserved in dry desert conditions. On their own, such discoveries may seem insignificant. Together, they can rewrite chapters of history. This is why archaeologists pay such close attention to detail. The smallest object can answer an enormous question. Yet, there are limits that even the greatest discoveries cannot overcome. If an entire archive was destroyed thousands of years ago, its contents may never be recovered. If a monument was dismantled and its stones reused elsewhere, its original message may be permanently lost. If a ruler deliberately erased the memory of a predecessor, only scattered traces may survive. These realities remind us that archaeology is not simply about finding treasures. It is about reconstructing human lives from incomplete evidence. That task demands patience, discipline, and humility. Ancient Egypt also teaches another important lesson. History belongs to everyone. The temples, tombs, and monuments that survive today are not merely relics of a distant civilization. They are part of humanity's shared heritage. Every preserved inscription allows future generations to learn. Every carefully excavated site contributes another piece to our collective understanding of the past. Protecting these places therefore matters just as much as discovering them. Illegal excavation, looting, environmental damage, and uncontrolled development can destroy information that can never be replaced. Unlike gold or stone, historical context cannot be recreated once it is lost. An artifact removed without proper documentation may lose much of its historical value. Its location, surrounding objects, and relationship to the site often reveal more than the object itself. For this reason, modern archaeology emphasizes careful excavation over rapid discovery. Finding something is only the beginning. Understanding it is the true achievement. Perhaps this explains why ancient Egypt continues to inspire such deep fascination. It is not merely a civilization of extraordinary monuments. It is a civilization that continually reminds us how much remains unknown. Every solved mystery reveals another unanswered question. Every discovery expands the boundaries of curiosity, and every generation inherits new opportunities to continue the search. Some of the mysteries explored in this documentary may one day receive satisfying answers. Others may remain forever beyond our reach. But that uncertainty does not diminish their importance. If anything, it makes them even more valuable. Mysteries encourage exploration. They inspire scientific innovation. They remind us that the past is not a finished story, but an ongoing investigation. Thousands of years after the last pharaoh ruled Egypt, people from around the world still travel to the Nile, still study ancient inscriptions, and still dedicate entire careers to understanding this remarkable civilization. That enduring curiosity may be ancient Egypt's greatest legacy, not simply the pyramids, not the temples, not even the treasures hidden beneath the sand. Its greatest legacy is the desire to keep asking questions. Because as long as questions remain, the story of ancient Egypt is still being written. And somewhere beneath the desert, inside an unopened chamber, beneath the floor of a forgotten temple, or hidden within an inscription that has yet to be fully understood, another piece of that story may still be waiting for the day it finally returns to the light. Ancient Egypt has stood for more than 5,000 years. Not only as one of history's greatest civilizations, but as one of its greatest mysteries. We've explored vanished pharaohs, forgotten queens, political conspiracies, unexplained deaths, and royal struggles hidden beneath the sands of time. Some of these mysteries may one day be solved through new discoveries and advancing technology. Others may remain unanswered forever, but perhaps that's exactly what makes ancient Egypt so extraordinary. It's a civilization that continues to challenge what we know, reminding us that history is never truly finished. Every excavation, every translated inscription, and every newly uncovered tomb has the potential to rewrite what we thought we understood about the ancient world. Somewhere beneath Egypt's endless desert, another forgotten chamber may still be sealed. Another royal tomb may still lie untouched. Another inscription may still hold the answer to a question historians have asked for generations. Until those discoveries are made, the story of ancient Egypt remains incomplete, and that mystery continues to inspire explorers, archaeologists, and curious minds around the world. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient Egypt's greatest unsolved mysteries, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into history's most fascinating enigmas. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep questioning the past, because history still has many secrets left to reveal.